Thank you very much, and welcome everybody, and thank you for joining our webinar today on the Advanced Cash Application for Dynamics AX. Today we're going to address this particular application or module within our Banking and Treasury Automation suite with the headline Workbench Magic, learn how to settle incoming payments in Dynamics AX automatically. So again, we're going to dive into this particular application in order to show you a little more details of how you can control and manage the level of automation in terms of settling incoming payments against the invoices in AX. If you're interested in more high-level sessions as well to the entire suite, then do pay attention towards the end of the session. We have a list of upcoming webinars as well, where we are running webinars every other week at least, and we'll interchange between high-level introductions to the entire suite and then having more webinars coming up on particular sub-modules, if you will, focusing on more specific sets of features like today. So in terms of the cash application process itself, what we'll be talking about here today is, of course, two situations. One being the situation that a lot of AX users and AR departments may be finding themselves in today, where the cash application process can be fairly manual and complex, depending on the number of transactions and the number of complex or different kinds of payments that you're getting in from your customers. And of course, the different types of payments that we're talking about can be depending on where you're operating in the world. We have wire transfers, we have ACHs, we have direct deposits, checks, SEPA in Europe, and local payment formats in various countries. And of course, the sources that these are coming from and the varying level of remittance information or payment advice or the lack hereof can make the process of applying the cash to the actual or the correct invoice in AX quite cumbersome. And in fact, it takes time away from doing what you should be doing, which is dealing with, you say, the real exceptions of customers that are not paying or are taking discounts or credits that are not approved. So really, what this results in, if you're sitting in this situation, it's a very labor-intensive process and a process that basically takes too long in order to close your books and your payments against your invoices. And in fact, in order to be in compliance and for auditing purposes, it's absolutely critical that you make sure that you get unapplied and probably applied cash dealt with fairly quickly. And of course, this becomes even more important as the company grows or as you experience an increasing number of transactions that you're dealing with. And of course, the desired state is, of course, the opposite of this situation, which is what we're trying to address with our application that we'll be showing you today, which is you want to be able to increase the accuracy of applying these payments. You want to be more efficient, and you want to automate as much as possible, and also be in control of the matching rules that you apply, the level of automation that you apply to your system, and you also want to be able to fine-tune this system as you go along and as the company grows going forward. And really what this will then allow you to do is then spend your valuable time as an AR person on, as I said earlier, deal with the true exceptions and the real customers and payments that you're having issues with, and not so much time on the payments that really should be able to go through and match automatically. So what you'll get with this is instead not only increased cash flow in itself, but also increased cash flow visibility. You'll experience or enjoy reduced overhead, and this of course magnifies also as the company grows and the number of transactions increase, and you will avoid manual errors going forward. So really you're setting up the company for a higher degree of automation with the ability to fine-tune it even further going forward, really allowing the company to focus on growing the number of transactions that the organization is dealing with. So just as a quick introduction to who we are, for those who may not know, we are an ISV, and we're certified for Microsoft Dynamics AX and SL. We've been working with providing quality solutions for many years. And our key focus really is around automating and improving some of the critical financial processes within SL and AX. And we do this around two primary solutions. So we have the solution that we're talking to today, which is the Banking and Treasury Automation Suite. And then we also have a new solution, Revenue Automation, which is for advanced contract management. And in fact, if you are interested in this, in the second product, which is a new product, we do have a session that we're running later today as well. For those interested, it will be running at 6 p.m. Central European Time and at noon Eastern US time as well. You can find more information on this on our website. But really, we provide a fully integrated solution to Dynamics AX. We provide this in close collaboration with all the partners that we work with, which is more than 400 across the US, Europe, and the entire world. And with our solution, you can also rely on a really extensive network of banks that we have integrated our solution with that work as, you can say, out of the box or plug-in formats. We are compliant with all the local and international payment standards and formats that any customer may be dealing with. So again, this could be ACH payments in the US, it could be international payments through the SWIFT network, or SEPA payments in Europe, or local formats such as the BAC standard in the UK. So no customer really is too small, or any bank. We have anywhere from local credit unions in the US to Tokyo Bank and so forth. And we, of course, also work very closely with Microsoft, and we're very proud to be ready for AX7 and Lifecycle Services and Azure Marketplace with our entire suite. And we were one of the handful of ISVs presenting this as being ready at Microsoft Convergence in Barcelona back in November. So we're up and running and already running a number of customers getting on our solution as well. In terms of the customer base we have, just to give an example of the extent of customers we work with, more than 1,450 customers across the globe. Some of the biggest ones operate and have standardized on our solution in more than 80 countries, and the biggest ones operate with about $12 billion worth of revenue. And of course, with our solution being a very horizontal solution, if you will, we have customers across virtually any industry or vertical that you can think of. So here's just a number of customer references that you may know of. And of course, as you can see, these are all representing various industries, and these are some of the bigger ones, of course, also having global operations. So we truly work with customers of all sizes, from the smaller ones to enterprise-sized customers. Before getting into the actual application and the stuff you're here to see, we also like to engage with the audience and just get a sense of who we have on the call today. So I'm going to ask Ainsley to pull up a little poll and give a few instructions on how to answer that one.
Yep, you should see a poll up on your screen now, just asking, you know, what your role is in the Microsoft channel right now, and I'll give you just a minute to answer. Quick responses. Thank you, folks, for paying attention. Appreciate it. Okay, back to you, Jonas.
All right, we're going to go on to actually getting to the application, and for that we have Tim Kahn on the call as well, and I'll actually point it over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Jonas, and good morning, good afternoon, everyone around the world. So what we're going to present today, of course, as Jonas said, the Advanced Cash application. I just want to give you just a brief overview of the full functionality of the suite. We organize that around these 5 pillars of functionality, going from left to right. We have the cash management automation area that deals with bank reconciliation. We had a webinar on that coming up, I think in a week or two, so stay tuned if you want to have more information about that. The second pillar deals with vendor payment automation, or you're paying your vendors out of the AP area. And as you can see, we cover a lot of areas there. Jonas has already talked about the extensive file formats across the globe. And then the customer payment automation, we're going to focus in today, of course, on Advanced Cash App. Also in this area, though, we have a web portal for customer payments where customers can actually pay via credit card. And we also, in this area, have the direct debit, or what we call AR-EFT. Over in the Treasury Connect area, we have extensive libraries of global file formats, which covers both the vendor and the customer area. And then recently we've added an FX settlement application, which for those folks dealing with multiple currencies in the AP side, it deals with aggregating those together, going out and shopping for the best currency rates, finding a counterparty that will trade for those rates, and then automating that process between the AP journal and an external trading site. We're integrated with a site called FXall that allows full, very seamless automation back and forth of the files to make those trades happen. And then finally, in terms of the area of risk management, in North America and Australia and those areas, we deal with positive pay for those countries that are using checks. And then also on the ePay side as well, for the credit card piece, it's a very PCI compliant application. And then also, as Jonas mentioned, we deal with revenue automation as well, in terms of risk management, in terms of subscription billing, revenue automation, recognizing revenue in the right fashion. So with that being said, I'm going to drill into the topic of today, the Advanced Cash Application in the center pillar. So let's talk about what the overall module does. And it deals with receiving electronic customer payments and remittance files. So they can come from a bank or directly from your customer. And those need to be analyzed and the customers identified and the invoice identified and made for settlement. Once we bring these transactions in, we use a workbench methodology that allows you to review those things that are matched. Those items that don't match up directly, there are tools available to get further research and so that you can refine those settlements. Then finally, after you would do the analysis within the workbench, the final step is then to create a standard AR payment journal. So it's fairly straightforward in terms of bringing a file in. And then what we do is in the workbench, we massage it, manipulate it, and then we create an AR payment journal as the final step. The solution includes many features, dealing with different kinds of matching rules, being able to do this process in an unattended fashion, dealing with auto credits and write-off handling rules, and then there are also alerts available to notify other users that need to research those particular settlements. So that's an overall description of the module. And to reinforce, the purpose is, again, to import the electronic file for payments, and then automatically match and settle those, and then deal with exception handling. And as Jonas reviewed, the benefits are shown as well. So with that, I'm going to now drill in for a couple of slides of detailed features of what the module includes. So it's designed for high volume of cash receipts. So this is not something you would use if you have just a few payments a week, but if you have anything over 20, 30, 50, 100, we have some customers actually bring in 30,000 invoices in the evening. Very high volume. But regardless, as you'll see, some of the features may apply depending on your volume. The main goal is to do settlement based on invoice. The ideal is if you get invoice information, then everything else flows from that. Certainly once we have the invoice, we can determine the customer and go from there. If we don't have the invoice information, but we do identify the customer, then we have other methods that we can use. So one of them is we can go and get the oldest document, and so we can take a payment in and apply those payments against the oldest invoices. Another option, if you have very particular customers that don't want to have an application done in an automated fashion, we can have what's called none settlement method, meaning the user would cherry pick and decide which invoices to settle the payment against. And then the external method allows us to bring in a file that's different from the payment file. That can happen if you have customers that have extremely large number of remittances, especially in the U.S. where with the lockbox situation for checks, it costs money for the company, for the bank to record that information. So if you get a payment file that has a very large dollar amount that's covering a lot of invoices, we can bring that payment in and then we can also go and access another file directly from the customer that has remittances, and that can save a lot of money in terms of those costs that the bank might charge. The different lookup options, of course, the invoice number is the ideal. We have to get back to an invoice at some point, but we can look up based on customer requisition or PO number. We can look up based on sales order number, bill of lading number, or payment reference. Very common that there may be a payment reference number that comes in the file, and that will track us back to the invoice. In addition, we have a custom method. So we have a number of customers that have more complex needs, so maybe they want to sum up the open balances on invoices. So we have a payment for €100, and we have the open balances are that they have 2 invoices that total up to €100 balance. So we could write a custom method that would go and say, if that open balances on the invoice matches the payment, then I'm going to settle those 2 invoices. So we'll see that in action in a minute. We have what's called secondary matching. So frequently you may get information from a customer that might have part of an invoice number. So maybe the invoice number in AX is IN0001 because you're using number sequences, but the customer, they put in the remittance file just say the number 1 or 01 or 001. Now that wouldn't be an exact match, but we call a secondary match, and we will do that match for you automatically. As I mentioned, we have a workbench that is used to refine the settlements. We'll show that in a second. And split payments. Some of you maybe have the situation where you have a customer that makes a payment to you, and that customer actually is a holding company, and they're actually making payments on behalf of other companies. It's common that you may have a corporation that may have branch locations, and they may be making payment for those branch locations. So the way the software works is once we determine that one of the invoices being settled is different than the company from the payment, we'll automatically split that payment into a separate item. So again, if we have a €100 payment and the first invoice is paying €60 against customer A and €40 against customer B, we will then split that payment so we effectively have received 2 payments, one for €60 for customer A and €40 for customer B. If you were in the AR payment journal, you would do that manually. Our import process does that automatically for you. We handle discounts, write-offs, and dimension defaulting. So any discounts you have set up in AX, when the payment comes in within the discount terms, it'll automatically be settled against that. If you have small balance write-offs, we will deal with that. So if you're getting a few euro or a few pennies, a few decimals off of the actual payment, we can write those off, and it will handle that same way AX does in terms of putting it to the right account, and then also fully settle that payment and that invoice. Dimension defaulting means that we can have the dimension of the payment defaulted from the invoice that's being settled. Those are options that can be set up. And some of you may encounter customers that take credits, unauthorized credits. Could be trade show credits, it could be something that was discussed on the phone. You didn't record the credit in your AX system, but when you get the payment, you find that the file has an unauthorized credit. By customer, we can set up to auto-generate that credit in AX and then fully settle it, which is very, very nice. Then in addition, because the main goal of this whole module is to get your cash in, as Jonas had talked about, bring it in as quickly as possible and get it onto the books. And so you don't want to decide, you don't want to have that credit holding you up. So what you want to do is get that credit created, settle that payment, but then we can create a reversing entry. What that means is we can create a general ledger journal that will have an exact dollar amount or exact euro amount of that credit. So say the credit is for 10 euro, we would create a reversing entry for 10 euro. We put it in a general ledger journal as a debit for 10 euro. We leave that journal on hold. So now the payment comes in, goes into an AR payment journal, everything's settled, you have the deposit that matches what was actually brought into the bank. But now you have this general journal that can be reviewed later, and you could, if you leave the debit in the journal and post it, it would effectively offset and remove the credit, it would put the money on account. If you delete it, if you post it with the debit, I may have misspoke there, if you post it with the debit, it would reverse it. If you delete it, it would have left the credit on account. So A lot of flexibility there. Again, the goal is to keep that cash coming into the account as quickly as possible. In AX, if you have an invoice that's already marked for settlement and it's not been posted, you cannot then create another payment against that same invoice. You'll get the message already marked for settlement. We have an option to allow that to go through. So if you get one of those in a settlement file, we'll bring it in. Actually, we'll remove the settlement against the invoice because it would fail if it went to the AR payment journal. We basically leave it on account, and then we make a notation, and it automatically puts a note in the note field. So then we get the money, again, we get the money into the deposit, but then in the AR payment journal, you can review that at a later time. We have a number of customers bringing in credit card statements. In terms of those settlements, those come in. One challenge there frequently is you will get a credit card payment, say today, and you might not have your process to get that invoice or sales order generated in your system until a day or two later. We can bring those in. We put them into our what we'll call our errors grid in the workbench. I'll show you that in a minute. And at that time, then what happens is you can push a button. It'll automatically get those invoices that are created later after the fact and settle them at that point. And if there's a fee associated with those settlements, we handle that and put that into the AR payment journal payment fee area. In terms of formats, the files that come into this module can be wide and varied, and so some of those are listed there. The CAMTO54 is part of the ISO 222 standard, more recently being adopted in Europe. EDI 820, 823, common usage here in the U.S. SimCore is a Canadian format. BAI2 is commonly used in North America. Wells Fargo in the U.S. has a new receivable manager function that can bring in all kinds of payments, not just lockboxes for North America. And again, fixed field or any kind of common delimited. All of this, those common delimited tab or fixed field, completely configurable within the module. No programming required, simply a screen that you can designate no XSLT transform that are required generally in AX to bring in external files. Each bank account can support different varied formats. So you may get a file directly from your customer that's an EDI 820 or a CAMTO 54, and then your bank may send you a comma delimited file. Those can also be incorporated in the same depository or bank account. The module supports automated processing, so we have a number of customers that bring in files on a nightly basis, completely unattended. We'll bring the file in, it will do the matching, and it'll create the AR payment journal. If there are any entries that we don't know how to deal with, we can create a quote research customer, kind of a bogus customer, and put all of those under that customer, but we end up with an AR payment journal in an automated fashion. That's run, of course, with an AX batch job running in the background. Centralized cash is supported, so if the payment is for company A and your customer is being paid or for companies B and C, we'll handle that, send it over to AX, and it'll do the do to, do from processing as well. We also support multiple payment of multiple currencies. So if one payment comes in and the currencies of the invoices are for differing currencies, we'll deal with that just as the way AX would deal with it as well. Let's go through a final slide of some features, and then we'll get a chance to take a look at the software. If you bring in a large number of invoices, a number of them, payments and invoices, a number of them may be fully settled entries. When that occurs, as we'll see in a minute, it goes into our payment grid. There's an option to automatically send those over to AR and post them immediately without waiting for the research items that need to be done. So it can be very valuable if in your particular environment you have a large percentage of settlements that come through automatically and are fully settled. And then you can get those into your AR payment journal as quickly as possible and recorded. For write-offs and reversals, which I'll talk about in a minute, any of the invoice and payment information, we track those back into those write-offs and reversals. Workbench alerts allows you to do research with your colleagues. So if you're working in the Workbench area, trying to figure out settlements and you have a question, you can designate another user to send that over to. On their AX notification tab, they will be notified. They will have a reference to what the settlement question is. They can click Go to Origin. It will take them immediately to the workbench in that area. They can then write a note to the workbench user. In the workbench user, they will be notified that someone has responded back. So it really provides a workflow methodology between your workbench and settlement analyst and other folks that are in your AX user base. In terms of settling invoices in the workbench, we used to require you to enter the amount if you were making a manual settlement. Now there's a simple checkbox that you can go down the list of your invoices and check them off, and it'll immediately do full settlement based on the payment that's available. There are a number of enhancements dealing with write-offs. So this write-offs deal with when you get a payment in and maybe there's a short pay. What do you do with that unbalanced, that unsettled amount? Well, maybe you want to write it off and so to a particular reason code. We'll talk about more about that, but you can leverage the AR reason codes, and with one button clicks, you can generate that credit or that write-off to distribute that write-off into any kind of reason code or GA that you like. There can be multiple entries for reason code. So say you have a short pay of $150. You could say $50 of it goes to this reason code and $100 goes to another reason code. And there can be rules that are set up by customer that use threshold amounts. So again, by customer, you can say whenever this customer has a short pay of, say, 10 euros, send it to this reason code, 50 euros to this, and up to, say, 1,000 euros to this. And those rules can be set up, and as the file is imported, those write-off rules can be automatically invoked, and that all processing can be handled automatically. In addition then to the write-off rules associated, we can have those reversals. Remember, I spoke about the fact that when you do some kind of a credit, you may want to have a reversal that you can review later. So those reversals can be related to all of those credits, and those reversals actually can have different terms and discounts from the write-offs that we started with. So that summarizes the kind of feature list that we have. Let's go over and take a look at the software itself. So here we have AX 2012. This is R3CU9. And what this represents here is the whole e-banking suite. As you can see, it's tightly integrated with AX, looks and feels exactly like the full suite module. All the functionality you see over here represents the full e-banking suite. All those pillars that I mentioned are incorporated here. In terms of cash application, it all handles over here under the periodic area under accounts receivable and processing e-settlement or lockbox files. The first screen that we start with is a history of those files that we brought in, that we've imported from the external world. So each one of these represents a file. There could be multiple files that represent a deposit. There can be one file that represents a deposit. In any case, we have summary information here about those files that were brought in. So to bring in a file, we go to Import Files. This is a list of the files in the various folders that have been designated. I'm going to check off this particular file and do the import process. At this point, it's it's reading the file, it's mapping the information based on the setup, and it's doing the automated processing that it can, and putting other items into research areas. In this particular case, there was an auto credit that was generated, so someone had put in a credit in the file, but it was not in AX, so we automatically generated the credit note, and then we did the application of it, and it's recorded here. I'll demonstrate that in the workbench itself. So this is the file that we just brought in. It has the grand total of the amount that was brought in. It gives you counts of the number of records that came in and the number of error count, meaning there were two items that the system could not figure out, and that's in the research area we'll talk about in a second. So the next step is simply to go over here to the workbench and drill in, and now we can begin to see what the system did as the files got brought in. So what we have here at the top of the screen, we have what we call the good payments grid. and at the bottom we have the payments with errors. The ones at the bottom we could not figure out, either name or invoice. The ones at the top, these are basically all ready to go over to an AR payment journal. Again, the goal of the module is to bring in items to the workbench and get as many items, or if not all the items you want, up in this top grid. And then the final step would be just to create an AR payment journal. And this step would basically take everything in the top grid that we've fully resolved, fully settled and dealt with, and push it over into an AR payment journal. At that time, you can have it automatically be posted as soon as it's created, or you can leave it on hold, allowing the user to come back at a later time and do further review. Again, the whole module's goal is this intermediary function of bringing into this workbench, having you manipulate the data in a way that's much easier than if you were in the AR payment journal and then generate that fully created AR payment journal. Let's take a look at some of these items and what happened as the file got brought in. First thing I want to take a note is that on each row, first off, it told us the customer that it determined. We can talk about how that's done. But you can also drill actually into the file itself. So depending on your format, you get visibility to the file, the data that created that entry. So in this case, actually, in some cases, you may have the name of the customer, so that's very helpful. The system clearly figured this out automatically. In this particular case, the second line happens to be related to the invoice. You see the CIV 0705. That happened to be a legitimate invoice in AX, and so you see here it was marked here, and that's how we knew how to settle it. So in other cases, we bring in other files. We can again drill in and see the payments. In this case, we have an invoice here, the 706. It was brought in, but also this was a credit that someone put in, a credit of minus 1,000. This happened to be an unauthorized credit, meaning it was not in AX yet. So what the system did automatically, we can drill down on each of these items to what were the settlements. So when I come down here, I can see what happened. This was that info log. It automatically created this this credit note, but minus 1,000, and actually took a discount on it, and then it created it fully settled the balance. And so that fully settled the item by both fully settling the invoice, but creating the credit, fully settling that payment. Again, that was all done automatically by the import process. Any of these items that are done here, you could come in manually and modify them. You could come in and modify the settlement amount or the invoice, the credit note or whatever. You would have to then go and modify the credit note if you needed to do that. So you have those capability to adjust and deal with that. If you remember before, I mentioned that you could bring in an external file. So say in this particular case, a customer made a payment, and then they sent you a remittance file that had 500 remittance entries. What you can do is you can load up open transactions here. This is going to wipe out all of these. Loads up those open transactions, and then this option here, import settlement details. You could go and pull that external file, and it would go and settle all these items automatically. As you can see, I've been doing some demo testing, and this has been generating a lot of these credit notes every time I import it. So that's just based on the data I had. Okay, so when I come back here, you notice that it says now that it was unsettled because of what I just did. I unsettled those items. This tells you whether the payment was fully settled or not, and over here this tells you whether you've got any invoices that were unsettled. So in this case, I've got this. Let me jump back up here. I'll drill now into settlements there, and we can see here it automatically did the settlement for us. And in this case, there was an invoice balance of $198,000. The payment amount was $89,000, so it fully settled that up to the extent that it could. That invoice now has an open balance. Okay, so it's got an open balance. It's quite a large open balance, right? It's $90,000. It's about $108,000 open balance. So if I wanted to write that off, if I wanted to, it's a short pay. If I wanted to write it off, I could simply come up here and click the create a write-off. This automatically comes in. It's automatically going to create a short pay of $108,000. I can designate a reason code for that item, anything I'd like to have it. These are AR reason codes, and then I can put a GL account. When I do that, if I click the create write-off, it's going to automatically generate that credit note for $108,000, which will effectively fully settle this payment. So the write-off capability is not only, it can be automated to do that as import occurs, or it's very simple, very easy to create a write-off on a one-by-one basis. Okay, we talked about split payments. You can see here, there's a mark here. Let me give you an example. Let's say this particular check or reference number, this 3456, if we found there were multiple invoices it was settling, and one of the invoices was from customer 003, but another was from 009, it would have taken that payment amount and split it into two amounts. So you'd have one line for 003 and one line for 009, but both would have the same check or reference number. Or we could do it down here. This is a reference number versus a check number. So that split payment, that would occur automatically upon import. All right, so let's go down to the bottom. This is the payments with errors grid, and we'll examine what happened here. So in this case, this was the customer account. It looked like we did a name lookup. Again, in terms of locating, if we don't have an invoice number, as we can see over here, these invoice numbers that came in were not found in AX. So when that occurs, we go back and say, well, how can we maybe find the customer? Because clearly if we find the invoice number, then we know the customer. But in this case, we did a lookup based on name. So we have a number of options there. We can do an exact lookup on name, letter for letter. Again, down here you can go and take a look at the file itself. You can see the here, and so we did a name lookup. If it's not an exact name lookup, say it came in as a Alpine Ski Resort, and so we wouldn't get an exact lookup. The user down here could go and do a lookup and find the particular case. It was Alpine Ski Resort, and we could identify that with Alpine Ski Lodge or the SI003. When we do that, we can store that information, Alpine Ski Resort, in the database. So next time we get something in that says Alpine Ski Resort, it's basically an alternate customer name. We now can identify it with that same Alpine Ski House. So that's one way to do it. Another thing is based on a bank account number or banking information. So if we get a file in that's got certain banking information, the first time we do a match, from thereafter we can store that, so the next time we bring in a file with that banking information, we'll identify it with that name. So the user has complete control over deciding what that name is. Now over here, what we have is that we have that customer name, but this invoice number does not belong to that customer, or we couldn't even find it in the database. So over here we can do a lookup. We can look up within that company across all companies for that particular number. In this case, actually this customer, this is now constrained by this customer. There's no invoices available. So in this case, what we could do is we could simply come in here and say there are no invoices available. We did get a payment. I'm going to not try to identify it with any invoice. And then what I do is simply come over here, and the goal again is to move these up to the payments grid. So now this is up here. That particular item is up here, that $200,000. It's not been settled against anything. It's been put on account. And so if we don't have invoice information or we don't have invoices, we can always put the money on account. Again, that's fine, because that's what we want to do is match the $678,000 with our deposit in the AR payment journal. So again, there's a lot of flexibility here in terms of doing the research. The goal is to take these items from below and move them up to the upper grid. The review part that I mentioned, we have that available here, and it's a simple matter of stating the review and says it needs to be reviewed, and then what I can do is come down here and select any AX user and put their user's name in, and now that user is going to be notified of this particular item. They'll get a notification. When they go and say go to origin, they'll come into this section. Then they can come in here and use the document management area and create a note. They enter the note here is we need to discuss. I'm thinking this is an error. Let's talk. So that user that did that process then puts that in. That's available now as a note. When we move this note up to the top grid, it will also stay here, and then it migrates also over to the AR payment journal itself. So that's how the workbench works. We've got the errors grid and the good grid. We move items up to the good grid, and then we finally create the AR payment journal. Just want to touch for a minute on some of the setup of the rules. Again, we have these write-off rules. As I mentioned, you can set these up and create these write-off rules. These rules then can be applied to a customer or set of customers, and these determine this threshold amount. Different threshold, you can have different reason codes, and then whether you want to create an auto credit upon import or you want to manually allow yourself to create the credit. A lot of flexibility, a lot of power in terms of creating the write-off, and then also with matching, as we spoke about before, we can have different types of matching. We can have matching based on invoice number, customer acquisition, sales order, and then the custom method as well. So in this particular matching rule that's set up, we say we're going to first look for a customer invoice number, but oh, I can't find that, so let me check then if I've got a bill of lading in the file. Let me check that, and if that fails, we'll come down to a custom method. This can be a method that's written, this can be written by your reseller, your customer, or for SK Global. And this would be a method that could do anything you'd like it to do. As I mentioned previously, you could sum up the balance dues on all the invoices, and if all those invoices have balance due that matches the payment, we can go and then settle all those invoices. So there's a lot of flexibility here in terms of setting up those rules. So that pretty much is a whirlwind tour of the ARE settlement area. I think with that, let's go back, and I'll turn it back over to, if I can get my mouse to come over here. So again, just as a highlight, we've covered this pillar here. We covered one area of customer payment automation called Advanced Cash Application. Many other things to cover. Again, I think Jonas will walk us through the next section, and I think it's time for some Q&A.
Right, thanks, Tim. Yeah, so in fact, before we jump into the Q&A, we do have one more poll that we would like to have you answer. So you should be seeing some options here to answer right now, and we'd simply like to know if you feel like you need any more information on the Advanced Cash Application or the overall suite in general. So as you apply these, then we'll move on to Q&A.
Yep, I'll give it just a few more seconds. You can vote, and then we'll open it up for Q&A. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and close this poll. And as I mentioned before, if you were on the webinar in the beginning when I was speaking about the administrative pieces of the session, you can ask questions a bunch of ways. So there's a little raise your hand kind of icon that you can click, and I'll unmute you if you'd like to ask your question live. Or you can go to the questions pane and type your question in there. Or you can even send me a chat message, and I'll make sure that Tim and Jonas get your questions. We'll just have a few minutes. We are still recording, so the question and answer will be part of the recording. Okay, let's see here. Okay, we've got one question popped up. What's the implementation effort for this product?
Sure, I'm happy to address that. So as you can see, the question is what do your files look like? How many different types of files are you bringing in? Many folks will have kind of one standard file, and then the question is what kind of data do you have? So in that case, it's fairly straightforward, and generally I would say within 1 or 2 days you can be fully configured, trained, and running on the product. So it's not a 2-week project. If you have many files with very disparate kinds of data, then it could probably take a bit longer. So it is dependent on the complexity of the file types and the variety of the data that you're getting. And as you can see, there's a lot of automation you can put in there. You can refine your write-off rules to make it more and more automated, get those threshold amounts set up. So as a general rule, it's fairly straightforward, but if you've got a very complex situation, that of course can extend it. And hopefully that gives you a rough idea.
Yep, and this is Ainsley. I'll add to that. If you're a partner on the line today, you can reach out to us directly and we can talk a little bit more about how you implement the product. It looks like most of the partners online have a good understanding of our products. If you're a Dynamics AX user, you could either reach out to your Microsoft Dynamics AX implementation partner if you have more questions, or you can email us or call us and we'll connect with your partner in that fashion as well to get you the answers that you need. It looks like you covered a lot of information, Tim. It doesn't look like we have any more questions for today, but I do believe you have another slide to pop up.
Very good. Yeah, I'll take that. And so just before we let everybody off the hook here, as I mentioned in the beginning, we are running webinars every other week. And as you can see here, the next one coming up on, in fact, in just 1 week, will be an introduction to the overall suite itself. So a bit more high level. If you have any colleagues that you think could use a good introduction to the overall suite. But then as you see, the next one on the 6th of April, one of our specific modules, which is around automating the bank reconciliation. This is another critical process, of course, where we're not just automating the reconciliation process, but doing it across the entire, regardless of the geographical or the number of banks that you're working with. So that's a very nice and very strong feature as well. And then it's alternating week after we're giving a high level again. So keep an eye out on our webinars coming up. The best way to do that is, of course, to stay in touch with us through our website, on LinkedIn, or through Twitter. So stay tuned there and running these webinars and keep you informed. So with that, here's just our information to get in touch with us. Otherwise, if you have any other questions, do feel free to reach out to us at any point of time. And with that, we're going to close off this session and being on this webinar today. We hope to hear from you soon. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.